Hello everyone, my name is Jocelyn, and in this video we're going to be talking about what happened after I released my previous video. I feel that it's necessary to put out a public, heartfelt and very sincere response. Look doe-eyed at camera. This is not your typical YouTuber apology video. I have to make apologies to no one. I owe no one an apology at all. I was 100% completely in the right, and y'all can suck it. Things certainly blew up. I can say that much with absolute 1011% certainty. Let me tell you a little bit about my expectations before we examine the reality of the situation. I had a few trepidations about releasing that video. I expected that I might get some sort of backlash for the tirade of slurs that I said, although they were bleeped, and of course they were included mostly for comedy effect, but also to prove a point about who can say what in, some contexts. I also expected that I might get a little bit of backlash for the ending of the video. That is to say, where I did a little bit of a cop-out and said, I'm not landing on this situation one way or the other. You make up your own minds. I'm not here to tell you what to think. I thought I might end up with a little bit of backlash for fence sitting, essentially. In reality, that did not happen. Not only was I not accused of fence sitting, I was very much accused of holding opinions that I do not have. The torrent of hate that I received, I was very much unprepared for, because I have never had anything that bad. Not even when I was discussing the way that TERFs in 2018's Pride barged to the front and took over. And I got a lot of shit for that from those TERFs. Let me explain my process. So, when I started receiving comments that were negative, shall we say, and we will get into a few of those specifics, I responded back. This might not have been the smartest thing for me to do looking back on it, but I generally tend to respond to negative comments as well as positive comments because A, I'm a small channel, I'm trying to grow the YouTube algorithm presence, so to speak. I am, if I engage more, then my video will get out more, and that's what I want. Also, it's not for the benefit of the person who I am arguing with necessarily. It is for the benefit of somebody else who might be seeing this back and forth happening in the comment section and seeing my side as well as the other person's side of the argument. But of course, it all became so hateful, I had no choice, I felt, but to turn off comments completely, which has killed the engagement that my video had, which is rather a shame because I think it could have gone even further. I believe that a lot of the people who watched my video were hate watching it, or at the very least were enticed by the title and the appearance and then didn't like what they saw. And I find it a real shame that I didn't reach a lot of people who might have agreed with my takeaways from that video topic. I'm not going to talk about any one particular individual commenter this time because I feel like nobody really should be highlighted. I don't want to give them the satisfaction of the attention that they so clearly crave and are willing to do just about any nasty bullshit thing to get it. So I've grouped together the types of comments that I got. Firstly, and this was not unexpected, I received a lot of transphobia. Existing in the year 2024, online, living in the UK, I experienced transphobia. I experienced a hell of a lot of transphobia online as opposed to in person, which is quite rare these days. I got the usual comments about trans women aren't women, about what is a woman then? About you're not a woman, you shouldn't be using women's toilets, blah, blah, blah. A lot of people calling me a man because, you know, Sure, sis. Whatevs. This was not unexpected, although it was just irritating. Because, yet again, people have decided to look no further than the package and not investigate the particular topic. Okay, the topic did include a lot of trans stuff. Maybe it was that too. Either way, there wasn't really much engagement with the actual material in the video. It was just trans equals bad, according to these people. Easy enough to dismiss. I don't care. I should turn this into a drinking game. I have whiskey back there. 1 second. Nothing like a shot glass shaped like the skull of your enemies. Check me out, I'm Lindsay Ellis now. Another thing that leads me to believe that people were looking no further than just the surface was that although I do take care in my presentation, I know I have a certain style that isn't to everyone's taste. Fine, cool, great. Again, I don't care. But when people start ripping into me about my appearance, my piercings, my tattoos, my anything else you want to say about, is that productive? Is that legitimately engaging in the content, or is that just commenters being douche nuggets? I think we know the answer to that one as well. However, necessary for me to mention because it was rather a lot. And again, also rather insulting because the way I looked in the videos, in like the way I look now, has very little to do with the subject matter that I was talking about in the video. I can see that there is something of a freedom of expression kind of argument to be made, and of course freedom of speech is a part of that umbrella, and those people giving me their opinions in the comments were exercising their freedom of speech. But there is a thing that I didn't say in that video, which I didn't think I would have to. It didn't occur to me until now, because it's a thing that I have said quite a few times before. And it is that while you may be entitled to have your own opinion, you are not necessarily entitled to share that opinion. So, my appearance, check. There seemed to be a lot of people displaying a great amount of idiocy when it came to the comments what they were saying and what they were saying about my video. I have absolutely no idea and no intention of finding out about whether or not these people were acting in a way that was taking me at face value a little too much, or listening to the parts where I said, here's how I define hate speech and hate crimes, and then ignoring the parts about, like, well, is that okay? Is that sort of freedom of speech still valid? Like, ignoring the fact that I asked that question and just going straight to the part where I said hate speech is bad. I have no way of knowing whether or not those people were latching onto the wrong thing intentionally or not. Whether they missed the point of the overall message of my video, or whether they are just deliberately misinterpreting what I've said and what I believe and assigning me malicious intent because they are in themselves malicious. Like, I have no idea what's going on there. I suspect that it is in fact some sort of combination of those two things. For example, there are a couple of instances in the video where I said this: women's rights. Now, this is not me decrying women's rights. This is not me trying to undermine women's rights. I believe in women's rights. I am a feminist. I have said this many times before on my channel. Why would I, a trans person who very wholeheartedly believes that trans women are women, why would I want those trans women to not have equal rights? Why would I want those trans women to be treated badly because they're women? Why would I want any woman to be treated badly because they're women? That makes no goddamn sense. What I was doing, and I really didn't think I would have to explain myself on this, with those particular sections of the video, when I said women's rights, I said women's rights with a silly voice. I said women's rights. I said it with a lot of air quotes. I put a filter on the screen. I was using the visual language of YouTube to indicate to the audience that I wasn't meaning women's rights when I said the words women's rights. I was using the visual language of YouTube, and I also mentioned in the video that it was me communicating that I do not truck, I do not stand by when someone says women's rights in a turf way, when they say women's rights, but it's actually a thinly veiled mask to throw over their transphobia. And again, I think that people in the comments weren't just highlighting what I said and taking it as face value. I think they were transphobic and they were using my words against me, telling me that I was belittling women's rights when that's not what I was doing, and then accusing me of being hateful and bigoted and blah blah blah. If I were to do it over again, I would also add a bit of text on the screen as well. A little asterisk, transphobia, anti-trans rhetoric. This is the thing that I'm really talking about when I say those words, women's rights, in that way. because I recognise that when TERFs say women's rights, they don't mean women's rights. They don't want equality for all people of all genders. They don't want that. Posey Parker herself has admitted that she is not a feminist. I obviously don't think that all TERFs are represented by this one person, but it says a lot about the movement, about what it's really for. When you have someone that prominent on such a large stage holding these events that are supposedly letting women speak, and then dismissing and removing cisgender women who speak up in favour of trans women and trans people. This is a person who does not care about women's rights, and this is the heart of the transphobic TERF movement. Women's rights, check. I also saw a lot of people defending J.K. Rowling because I spoke up against her. It is not the first time I have spoken up against her, nor is it the first time that I have received backlash for it, but never this much. I am not the first or only person to speak up about the hateful, negative things that J.K. Rowling has done to the trans community. I think people saw me as some sort of vulnerable, small YouTuber that they could really just vulture onto when it came to that. I don't have any regrets about what I said about J.K. Rowling. The worst thing I did in that video was call her a bitch. She's been called a lot worse. And she might even deserve some of it. Notice I said might. Everything else I said about her was factually very, very true. J.K. Rowling, check. There were one or two comments about the protests that are happening, the pro-Palestine protests that are happening, which not directly related to the topic of my video, because obviously I was talking about the Scottish hate crime bill, not the Palestine situation or the Palestine protesters, but it does fall under the sort of general topic of freedom of speech, so fine, okay, you can talk about that. Any mention coming from other people of that was, look at this one case of one Jewish person being beaten up by some people that I'd never even heard about and I can't verify if it's true. While I do think that beating up a random Jewish person would be wrong of anyone to do, whether it's a pro-Palestine supporter, protester, or whether it's just anybody else, of course that's wrong. Nowhere in the comments from anybody else did I see anyone commenting about the police systemically cracking skulls and macing the eyeballs of pro-Palestine peaceful protesters. Again, I think that's slightly more relevant to the topic of a systemic, legal, official body suppressing freedom of speech, because that is verifiably happening in much larger numbers. Never mind the actual reason for the people doing the pro-Palestine protests in the first place. Israel-Palestine, check. Freedom of speech itself. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about my actual position on freedom of speech, because the way people reacted, it kind of you would be forgiven for thinking that in the video, if you hadn't watched it, I had said something along the lines of calling for the death of freedom of speech, as well as single-handedly killing it myself and then pissing on its grave. This is something that I did not do. Of course, I talked about the consequences of freedom of speech. Of course, I talked about where that line is, where hate speech and hate crimes not only impede on freedom of speech, but also are using the term freedom of speech to mask the hatred, the true intention, and me pointing out where I draw the line for hate speech and where the Scottish Government seems to be drawing the line for hate speech, but it was still rather vague. Me saying that is not the equivalent of me being against the principle of freedom of speech itself. Me raising questions about that, and I do genuinely mean questions, because again, I wanted to inspire the audience to think, not just react in a negative way. Of course, I recognise the importance of freedom of speech. And again, I'm not saying this to justify anything to anyone in particular because, again, fuck y'all. But I will say to anybody who watches the video and is unclear about my position, this is my position. You know? I will say to anybody who, of the 3 commenters who were supportive of me in the comments, I want to say thank you very much. One of them was my researcher, but still. And as she pointed out in the comments section herself, I'm talking about hate crime here. I'm talking about when words become actions, become threatening on somebody else's life, livelihood, you know, whatever. And people in the comments reacting and saying, oh, you're just against bad words. She pointed out that stochastic terrorism isn't just hurty words. Which is why I believe there is a line somewhere between hate speech and freedom of speech. You might have a different opinion as to where that line is. I still haven't fully decided where that line is. I just outlined where I think it might be. In a way that makes sense to me. In a way that should, I think, make sense to a lot of people. Clearly I was wrong about that part. It was, of course, an interestingly fitting microcosm of the whole freedom of speech argument happening in my very comment section about freedom of speech. There were people who ended up abusing their freedom of speech, and then they were met with the consequences of that action, which was me deleting their comments. Freedom of speech, check. Okay, another incident that people liked to throw in my face, a little bit more frequently than the Palestine protesters, was the incident that happened in an American school. I don't know exactly the details, although I have heard of this incident happening before it was mentioned in the comments, that there was a boy who wore a dress in order to gain access to the girls' toilets to then molest girls in there. As if that was relevant to the conversation about freedom of speech. So I and the whole trans community now have to suffer just because one person who wasn't trans, who claimed to be trans only for the sake of accessing those spaces and had no prior claim of being trans, abused that position. And of course that was wrong. Of course I condemn the actions of someone who would abuse somebody else. No matter what the situation, no matter what the circumstances, no matter where the incidents happened. But apparently, according to these fuckwits online, I and every other trans person who is advocating for trans women to use women's spaces and trans men to use men's spaces, yes, that's a real thing. One of the commenters didn't even believe that. Apparently it's our responsibility, apparently it's our fault that those people got molested when it wasn't a trans person even doing it. And I can see the logical connection that those people have made, but it is still just an excuse to hate on trans people, to control trans people who are completely law-abiding, which is like 99% of us. It bothers me when people say negative things. Of course it does. I'm only human. But it bothers me a hell of a lot more when people say negative things that aren't founded in any sort of truth basis, in any sort of fact. How am I or any other trans person supposed to be responsible for one person who abused a system? If trans people were not allowed in the facilities that aligns with their genders, because in some places they're not, that person would just find another way to do molestation, which is, and rightly should be, illegal and punishable. So throwing the rape incident in my face, check. Many people admitted to not even watching or fully watching the video, which means that they missed the part in the end where I did not come down fully one way or another. That's their own fault. Why are you telling me that? Why are you telling me that? Dumbass checked. I also got accused a couple of times of attention seeking. This is the dumbest, most stupid accusation of all. First of all, I'm a creator posting videos on YouTube. Of course I want attention. That goes without saying. Of course, I don't just want attention for the sake of attention. I want attention for the sake of bringing my thoughts to the front, to share those thoughts with the world, to, create... My intention was, at least, to create some sort of dialogue around the subject, not be shouted down by an angry mob who didn't even watch the whole fucking video. And of course some of those comments went hand in hand with the, why do you look like that? You must have daddy issues. Excuse me, what? I was accused of being the problem. I was accused of being a clown, a demon. I actually kind of liked that one. The Joker. Fat. I got called fat. At this point, the infantile nature of the insults was really coming out. So of course I'm not going to pay that any mind. I know my body shape is what it is. Does that mean that I am incapable of having a coherent idea and thought for a video? Does that mean? No, it doesn't actually. That would be a genetic fallacy. So fuck you. And I do not appreciate trying to be psychoanalyzed by armchair fuckwits who think that I have daddy issues because I have piercings. My face, my body, my life, my choice, not yours. I'll give you this little tidbit of self-deprecation for free. If I want to wear a goddamn door knocker on my face, I will. Attention seeking, check. Oh, and of course, when I did respond to some of these comments with disdain, because I felt that they kind of deserved the disdain because they were coming at me from a very disingenuous place or a very negative place, a hurtful place, a bigoted place. I then got accused of being disrespectful towards people who were already being disrespectful to me. Was it a smart thing to continue the cycle? Maybe not. But I did in those moments want to give those people a taste of their own medicine. I don't see anything unfair about that. I also saw this little choice phrase weaponized against me. Do what you want. Well, yes, I will do what I want. Thank you very much. No need to add some caveats underneath it. No need to follow it up with a but. But, of course, those people did, so here we are. Disrespect, check. Now, I live in a world where the whole sort of focus of the culture war is focused very sort of pinpointedly, laser focused on the attention of trans people. And I think it's so bad that people didn't actually want to engage with the things I said. I think they just saw me, a trans person, openly admitting to being trans, openly talking about trans topics, and then just reacting to that. I think that's what happened. Of course, I have no real way of telling because the people in the comments were all being shitbags. And this is the internet, so shitbaggery is already kind of a given. But a lot of people are biased against me just for existing as a trans person. So I can't really take their criticisms to heart, to mind, or even to be remotely believed because of the bias. I can't be my own judge because, of course, I'm biased in favour of me. I think I did a great job. I worked really hard on this video. I think that I'm a good person. The villain of every story thinks they're a good person. That doesn't tell me anything. And of course I have friends who I have talked to about this in real life who have assured me that I am a good person who, you know, also are biased in favour of me. So getting some kind of an unbiased read is actually super difficult in this situation. Is objectivity even possible here? And of course, I have questioned whether I did the right thing or not, whether I presented it in the right way or not. And I've come to the conclusion that the world probably wasn't ready for that. And as a smaller creator, I definitely don't think I deserved the massive fucking tsunami of hate that flooded my comment section. Now, if I was wrong, sure, people should point out if I'm wrong, no matter how big my channel is. But there was seriously fucking dogpiling against me. Which I have decided not to stand for. Why should I take that? I don't deserve that. And that is why, for the first time ever, I disabled the comments on a video of mine. That's enough of that. At the very least, I've got it out of my system now, and I can move on to work on a completely different project now. And I already know what it's going to be. And I already know that there's going to be some goddamn backlash about that too. But with that said, thank you for watching. Non-binary is valid, goddammit. And to those 3 people in the comments, again, mwah, you rule. To no one. Oh, shh.